Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Pakistan and China's friendship has been termed as a friendship higher than Himalayas, deeper than ocean, sweeter than honey, and stronger than steel. This particular bilateral relationship between Pakistan and China has stood the test of time, both the countries standing by each other in difficult and challenging times. This all-weather strategic partnership between Pakistan and China has manifested in multiple forms, most notably that we'll be bringing in discussion in today's show that relates to China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a flagship project of the Chinese President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative. Why this particular CPEC is known as the flagship project of the BRI. Will try to take the understanding regarding that also. Now, when we specifically talk about this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, it on one side is the manifestation of the desire of both the sides of having a shared prosperous future. On the other hand, also shows that unflinching trust between Pakistan and China. Now, since its launch during the first phase of the CPEC, during the first decade of it, most notably, there have been some harvests around 510 kilometers of motorways and highways, 6,000 megawatts of electricity generation, also about $25.4 billion of foreign direct investment. The first phase specifically was focused on energy and infrastructure projects. So when we talk about transition towards the second phase of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, it is being expanded into other key sectors, most notably in agriculture, information technology, and tourism also. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif is expected to visit China in the first week of June. During this particular visit, he will be having high-level interactions with the top leadership of China, including Chinese President Mr. Xi Jinping. Also, during his visit, there will be also focus on the initiation or rather the transition of CPEC from the first phase to the phase 2 that is also being dubbed as CPEC 2.0. Let me quickly bring in our esteemed panel of guests to talk about this important game changer project, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a flagship project of Belt and Road Initiative. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Fazal Rahman. He is the Executive Director at Pakistan Council on China. Dr. Fazal Rahman, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. On Skype at the same time, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Hassan Daud. He is former Project Director and Coordinator at CPEC Projects. Dr. Butt, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Fazal Rahman, if you allow me, let me begin the discussion with Dr. Hassan Daud. Dr. Hassan Daud, when we talk about China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, it is termed as the flagship project of Belt and Road Initiative. Why it is called the flagship project of Belt and Road Initiative? For what sort of prospects and dividends associated with it? Dr. Butt, unfortunately, we can't hear you. If you kindly unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think the level of commitment, the level of friendship, and the projects that have been delivered during the past decade, I think that in itself echoes the fact that CPEC is the game changer and is actually the buckle of the belt. And when I say buckle of the belt, it means the belt is the Belt and Road Initiative. I think the way that Pakistan, and when I say Pakistan, I mean every segment of our society and a whole of government approach was taken in terms of working on projects. And these projects were, there was novelty in these projects. You know, in the energy sector, we were looking at some projects like Thar, which were never undertaken by Pakistan or any other developing countries, ensuring our energy security. We were, from a KKH standpoint, we were extending it downwards towards south, and I think the overall development of the motorways, the 585 kilometers of highways and motorways through China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, creating rural-urban synergy for Pakistan, creating our economic, working as an economic stimulus for Pakistan. I think this is really a game changer. And of course, the main project and the main deliverable of the Belt and Road Initiative. But when we talk of CPEC and the Belt and Road Initiative, I think we also need to realize that this year is the 73rd celebrations of our friendship with China. And in this time, I think and during these times, we have seen a lot of um, thrusts and troughs. We have seen a lot of challenges globally, including COVID and some of the other challenges. But one thing that has stood the test of time has been our friendship with China. And one thing, despite COVID, which has delivered and actually given us great dividends, has been the China-Pakistan economic corridor.
Right, Dr. But when we talk about the first phase, energy projects and infrastructure projects, as you've already mentioned, quite a vast network of motorways and the highways spread across Pakistan. Also, when we talk about the electricity generation, you also mentioned about the Thar project also. So when we talk about the second phase of the CPEC, which key sectors are going to be focused upon, where this expansion is going to happen, and what are the prospects associated with those sectors when it comes to bilateral cooperation between Pakistan and China?
I think this is a very, very good question. And I think one of the sectors that you forgot to mention was the Gwadar port and the way that it's contributing to our blue economy and shall contribute when the whole project is completed by 2050 and before that. And the way that Gawada city will shape up as the hub of transportation and also logistics. When we sit today and work on the second phase of China-Pakistan economic corridor, we look at some of the activities, some of the challenges, and some of the targets that were actually articulated in the CPEC long-term plan, which was made in 2017. And I think in the next phase, what it highlights was that by 2025, we were supposed to have a special economic zone, and by 2030, perhaps we were supposed to have ML1. And between these projects, the rest, the infrastructure, the railway, road, optical fiber, Gawada port, all of them have actually demonstrated that we can, through synergy, develop these projects. The two that I've mentioned are still they're still much below the level that we wanted to. We've done a lot of work. We've built the initial boundary lines around the special economic zone. But when we look at the next, say, 10 years of CPEC, which will perhaps be the second phase, so to say, I think what we need is now benefiting and leveraging from the infrastructure that we have and work in the agriculture sector, work in science and technology, because China is now the master of science and technology, AI, robotics, blockchain, you name any product and technology sector. I think China is now the leader of that. So we need to build that interaction. I think the other sector that we need to work on is the blue economy. We need to connect coastal tourism with China. We need to benefit from the development of Gwadar, build on the aqua and fishery sector, and perhaps there we need to work more. One more sector that I think we need to work on is besides the science and technology, is also the education sector. We need to link universities of Pakistan to universities of China. There are certain China Study Center, but I think they have to expand. They have to actually work towards developing a structure which benefits for the kind of faculties that we required in the future. And I think HEC has a major role to play when we move forward towards. Last point that I would like to highlight is, and it's also very critical, is that in the next phase, we need to increase the level of people-to-people interaction from media to academia to general business leaders and also general public at large. What we have to work on is perhaps areas. I think I'm in GB, the starting point of CPEC. So what we need to work on is perhaps looking at looking at an wholesome approach, and then work towards the second phase, where we need to build on the industries. There is a thirst for our industrialists to build joint ventures, benefit from that, the incentives that are available in the special economic zone. But I think for this, we have to work harder than we have worked in the first phase. Second phase has its challenges and promises. We have to work together, whole of government approach, BOIs, SIFC, every aspect of the government has to work together, even the business chambers, for us to realize the second phase.
Right, you already mentioned about SIFC now, specifically talking about this sector for agriculture. That is one of the key areas SIFC is actually also focusing upon. Now, in the second phase of the CPEC, agriculture happens to be one of the key areas. So talking about a CPEC and SIFC at the same time, how do you think these both, CPEC as a project and SIFC as a forum, can work together in order to get the maximum yield or enhance the agricultural productivity, the exports in return to the outer world from Pakistan?
This is a very good question. I think and it's just not specific to China-Pakistan economic corridor. I think overall industrial development of Pakistan, overall economic growth of Pakistan requires us to have a suprastructure which can work for connectivity, creating that synergy which is lacking. And when I say which is lacking in terms of, we have BOIs in respective provinces, we have a federal BOI, we have Ministry of Commerce and Industry, but sometimes linking them together becomes a challenge, especially for an investor who has language and cultural issues and is stepping into new turf. They need a place where they can have a sustainable one window service. And that one window service, I think, would require technology, but also requires an approach where they are confident that the government, through their different arms, can support. But I think SIFC, what SIFC needs to do is also help build the capacities through China, through other sources, through perhaps donors, build the capacities of the BOI, engage more productive discussion and identify new areas where they can help and speed up the processes. Like, for instance, the special economic zone, where we need speed, we need more joint ventures. And I think when SIFC builds on road shows and perhaps a narrative, we need to take that to areas in different areas in China, the industrial hubs of China, and create sister relationship in terms of SEZ partnering and creating that MOU or a relationship where sister SEZs can be established, as we have for sister cities. I think the visit of the Prime Minister, which is forthcoming, would be very critical at this point, because he will be visiting more than one cities and going to industrial bases of Pakistan. And I think he needs to, along with SIFC or any structure that can actually help build the confidence of the investors to come forward. We will do the hand holding. We will create that enabling environment. We will create that whole of government approach. And then from there, we will also determine the partners with which you can work on business level, connecting them to FPCCI, connecting them to business chambers across Pakistan, and then identify certain sectors. They should not start working on the entire spectrum of CPEC. They should identify certain sectors like agriculture, like perhaps mines and minerals, and also tourism. And if these three sectors, we can benefit from SIFC, benefit from synergy of the government, ensure that the investors' rights are protective, the incentives that we have promised are offered on time at the right place and to the right investors, that would be great. One more thing that I would like to also, through your program, convey to the Chinese investor is that Pakistan, whether it's mining, whether it's tourism, whether they're industrial sector, we need investment, we need partnership, but it has to be responsible. It has to be environmentally cautious, because there are challenges coming environment where we have already had floods and the challenges around that. So I think this partnership under the Global Development Initiative of China, which is talking about energy transition, which is one area that you mentioned, we are moving towards renewable energy, solar, hybrid, and of course, hydel projects. And we need more of that, and we need more China support in that.
Right. So one last quick comment regarding this particular point. When you talk about CPEC in particular, the win-win cooperation or the mutual desire on both the sides, we have understood quite in detail at what sort of dividends and prospects CPEC actually offers to Pakistan, and what should be the strategies as far as the Pakistani side is concerned regarding taking the dividends out of it, and how beneficial it could be for Pakistan, and it's already proven to be. When we talk about China in terms of win-win cooperation emanating out of CPEC, could you shed a little bit more light on that?
will also speak on the challenges that we saw in the last 10 years of CPEC. One of them was countering bad narrative that was built around CPEC and BRI. And I think we need to build our capacity to together thought that poor narrative and programs that you do, and also the discussion that we have in programs like these. I think that has to be extended, and perhaps we have to look at new avenues where such cooperation can take shape. We also need support of China in renewable energy transition, and not just in the generation part, but also distribution part and the transmission part, because China at this time has the technology, has the strength where bringing in that new technology can help some of the challenges that Pakistan has. Also, I think in the past 10 years, and one of the most important aspect of any project is to determine the lesson learned. I think we need to also look at the capacity of our human resource. We have a large size human resource, but we need to work on building the technical abilities, and especially of the technologies of the future like AI, robotics, and for that support of China is essential. We need to work on the debit sector, perhaps because in the past 10 years we saw that our debit sector is weak, and as opposed to Chinese, and the Chinese workers who are coming here, when you get them together with the Pakistani workers, there were certain challenges besides the culture and language challenges. We need to work on improving our language center, especially the Chinese language center, because if we can, and also on the Chinese part, they need to understand more Urdu and perhaps our cultural aspects. So for that, I think again, as I said, HEC's role will be important. One other lesson that we learned was, I think, the possibilities of more women participation in our projects. I think that aspect, because in China women work equally as men. Here, and I'm glad to say that in Thar we were able to bring more women, and their participation at community level was extremely useful. But I think larger, when we move to other provinces like GP, also in Sindh and Balochistan, I think more women participation, especially in special economic zones of CPEC, we should have land allocation quota for women where they can work with Chinese women entrepreneurs and then create that ability and synergy to perhaps enter the Chinese supply chain. So these are some of the lessons that come to my mind.
Dr. Hassan Daud, but former project director and coordinator of CPEC projects, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Fazal Rahman is joining us in the studio. I really seek your pardon to have kept you waiting, Dr. Hassan Daud, but had to go a little earlier for an important engagement. So talking about the dividends that have been yielded, the early harvest of the CPEC phase 1.
Well, actually, initially, CPEC was designed as 1+4 framework, in which CPEC was the center of it, and Gwadar, industrial cooperation, infrastructure development, and energy were the all other 4 sectors. I think I will, differ a little bit from the perspective of Dr. Daud, and I would look at CPEC as kind of a mixed result which we see. When initially we mentioned that CPEC, the concept of CPEC is 1+4, that means that all the 4 segments has to be carried through from the very beginning. But unfortunately, or due to certain constraints, we have been focusing on the infrastructure and energy projects. We did not give much attention to the special economic zone development, which is industrial cooperation between the 2 countries under the framework of CPEC. So that has resulted into delay of establishing special economic zones, which we were expecting that this is going to be a real turnaround as far as the dividends of CPEC are concerned for the Pakistani people, and the trickle-down effect would be felt at the grassroots level. But that has not happened. After 10 years now, our special economic zones still are at very infancy stage, very initial stage, and they are going to take some time before they really mature and start producing some exportable products.
So what lessons these special economic zones that you have talked about, what lessons have been learned during this particular span of time? during the establishment of these special economic zones, and what are those areas which need to be actually focused upon and addressed?
Well, first of all, I would say that we didn't have any special economic zone in the past. We have had industrial states as small pockets of industrial production and development, which were given some special concessions in terms of tax and in terms of their production. But this is for the first time that we are entering into into establishing special economic zones at the proper level, and we are trying to learn from the Chinese experience. And Chinese experience has been a mixed experience as far as the creation of special economic zones are concerned. There are several special economic zones even in China which have not really produced the desired results. There are success stories, but then there are stories which are not really
So what are the lessons to be learned from those success stories?
The lesson
China
is that
implemented where they got the dividend from.
Right.
So how to apply that one over here in order to make the special economic zones here in Pakistan successful?
I think that we have to understand certain endowments which are required for creation of a special economic zone. There is a financial hub. It has to be financially supported. Then there is a availability of skilled manpower. Then appropriate technology should be applied in those special economic zones, and certain incentives has to be ensured as far as the producers in that special economic zones are concerned. So I think that since we have not really started, we have not reached that level where all these things can be combined, we have to also think that these special economic zones should be interfacing with the existing industrial structure in Pakistan. They should not be like islands in isolation. So we have to we have to do a lot of work on this and try to develop a skilled human resource for employment in these special economic zones so that they are available all the time. And then we have to also ensure the capital for making these special economic zones more productive. So that's why we are seeking for foreign direct investment into these special economic zones. And I think that given the kind of incentives that we are offering, it should be attracting foreign direct investment. And then there are several other factors which are going to be influencing the confidence of the investors into special economic zones.
You just brought in this particular terminology, islands in isolation. The special economic zones shouldn't be serving as an island in isolation. So when we talk about the vast network of motorways and highways under CPEC in particular, over 500 kilometers successfully been laid so far. So these are basically aimed at connecting those islands, special economic zones, which wouldn't be in isolation after the connectivity through these roads and motorways, no?
Well, actually, yes. I mean, if you look at the four, priority special economic zones, one is along the motorway, the Allama Iqbal in Faisalabad. The other one is Rashikai, which is again, close to the motorway. Then there is Dhabaji, which is in Karachi, which is, again, very accessible. And then there is Rashikai, the Bostan in Quetta. So, that is a little, out of the way. And I think much work has not been done on that, priority special economic zones. I was recently in Quetta and I have, seen the place. There are some issues and problems. So we have to take, we should not be very rhetorical about things, about the development of these special economic zones, because this is going to be the prime focus of the phase 2. So we have to take a very realistic look at these special economic zones so that we are in a position to rectify the situation and identify the problems, issues and challenges and come up with solutions, for those problems.
So when we talk about Gwadar Port in particular, the prospects as far as the regional connectivity is concerned, how do you see that?
I think,
it's already functioning.
Yeah,
right?
It's already functional, but as far as the traffic and as far as the utilization of that port is concerned, that is still underutilized. We have to create more networking of infrastructure. We have to give more incentive for the cargo handlers to use that port for trading. We have not started having kind of cargoes coming from China and utilizing this the Gwadar port. The problem here is that we are talking about the potential of all these projects, but we have not really seen the actual outcome, the actual result or dividend, what we are saying, of these projects. So we have to really try to make them more and more beneficial and try to optimize the utilization or utility of these projects. So I think Gwadar at the moment is underutilized. It needs to be upgraded. As Dr. Daud has mentioned that sort of another 10 years it will take. So which means that we have taken 20 years to make Gwadar a very important or a natural hub of communications and all that. So what I'm trying to say is that the huge potential exists. There is no denying the fact. And at the same time, China, our dear friend, is very much eager to help us develop all these things. We have to sort of make a more comprehensive, all-inclusive policies which can speed up all these things so that we can get the dividends or the desired result well in time, and which should be commensurating with the development of the BRI, because if we call it a flagship of the BRI, then it has to be matchable in terms of time and speed of the BRI.
Right, I'll come back to you, have your understanding on a couple of other important aspects. For now, we are joined by another participant, Ms. Zoon Ahmed Khan, Research Fellow at Center for China and Globalization. Zoon, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. We are expecting a very important visit by Pakistan's Prime Minister Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif to China, and he's of course going to have some important interactions with the top leadership, including the President Xi Jinping also. And also during his visit, it is also expected the initiation or the transition towards the CPEC phase 2. How are you anticipating this particular visit of Prime Minister?
Firstly, thank you for having me on the program. And I actually, before I come to the visit, which is going to be historic, it's also going to be Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's first bilateral visit since he took office this term. I would also like to agree a lot with what Dr. Fazal Rahman was saying. I was able to hear his points, not Dr. Hassan Daud's. I joined a bit late. But I think in general, I mean, before we come to the significance of this visit, let's emphasize that CPEC has been about, a domestically determined vision about improving Pakistan's capacities. And when we talk about, transport infrastructure, when we talk about special economic zones, when we also talk about learning from China's example, learning from China's own development, then one of the most important things would be to be receptive and to understand that even if, let's say we have a certain plan for Gwadar Port, or we have a certain plan for certain special economic zones, we have to be, as Pakistan, very receptive to how that plan is playing out and to be open to changing our policies in the process. And this is the one thing we really learned from China. Another important aspect is that we need to learn from other successful examples of special economic zones that have been inspired by China's experience but exist overseas. So we see countless examples in East Asia. Coming to Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's visit, of course, I think our viewers...
Zoon, if you allow me to hold you for a second over here, when we talk about the special economic zones, Pakistan being receptive, if Pakistan wants to learn from the Chinese experience also. So the number of special economic zones is already mentioned by Dr. Fazal Rahman. Also, not all the special economic zones, even within China, had been that much of a success story. But
yes.
Right. So specifically talking about those special economic zones which have been the success stories, how Pakistan can be receptive from that particular success story within China and how that can be applied over here in Pakistan to make a certain special economic zone here successful.
Okay, I wish there was a very straightforward... Is that for me or another? Okay, I wish there was a straightforward answer. What I can tell you, living here, and I think both Dr. Hassan Daud and Dr. Fazal Rahman, with their extensive travels in China, will say is that any special economic zone you visit in China, any village you visit, any city you visit that has experienced a degree of success has its own unique solutions. So number one, I mean, let's say that we talk about the special economic zone in Karachi. We will have to think about a 5-year plan firstly to see what investment are we going to attract. Number two, to attract investors, to attract private businesses from China, we will also need to know that those businesses want to see similar businessmen from Pakistan engaging them. And I think this is a very important process when we talk about phase 2, when we talk about special economic zones. It is about not only creating the SIFC, the Special Investment Facilitation Council, and various policies that are integral and prerequisites to attracting investments, but it's also to have a certain 5-year plan and to attract the right interest, to have policies specific to that situation and say, every year. Like, for example, we have the bilateral coordination mechanism between China and Pakistani stakeholders to understand the success and progress of certain projects. We will need to have such yearly mechanisms to understand, okay, if this is the industry we are focusing on, to what extent is the labor we have trained for that industry appropriate? What is our projection for skills development programs, for attracting investors, not only from China, from other countries as well? To what extent are certain XYZ policies successful or not? Are we sure we don't
Once again, I see your pardon. Once again, a very important point. I'll have to stop you over here. This particular point of having the skilled workforce has been highlighted by Dr. Fazal Rahman. Earlier in his take, Dr. Daud Butt has also talked about, when we specifically talk about the lessons learned from the CPEC phase 1, the capacity of the human resource. You have also brought up that point here as well. Now, enhancing the capacity or making the workforce more skilled, appropriately skilled as to be beneficial in those special economic zones. I want you to elaborate by giving some recommendations in that direction, please.
I think my first recommendation would be that we need to be in terms of industries. Let's say, for example, core industries are IT, agriculture, textile, minerals, etc. Right? What we need to do is we need to collaborate on a government-to-government level, first of all, which we are already doing with Chinese technical and vocational education institutes. We need to allocate. We need to have like this good communication and ecosystem between the local government, the Chinese government, the technical and vocational institutes on both sides, and the businesses on both sides to establish certain targets. Let's say an investor is interested in opening a factory, in investing in a factory, and they need 1,000, 1,500 skilled workforce for that, right? So they will need to have a very targeted plan in facilitating the training of Pakistani local workforce for that. So, I mean, it has to be, we are already seeing a degree of success. For example, we have many students by the thousands in Chinese technical vocational education institutes. I myself work very closely with Luban, which is like Confucius Institute, but the technical and vocational education aspect. It has been endorsed by President Xi as well. It is leading in terms of China's own TVET education. China is the leading country in the world for that. Pakistan is a priority country for these institutes to recruit students from. What we need to currently do is bridge the gap. And for that, I will have to say that instead of hypothesizing, or let's say that we look at Shenzhen or certain examples in China that were successful in a world 40 years ago, their trajectory went in a positive direction. We have to look at more current, recent examples. And for that, we have Thailand, Laos, and we have many countries in the region that are able to bridge these gaps, that are able to create mechanisms. Pakistan has a certain amount of success in that. But I think my view is, and I'm not sure if the other panelists will agree with that, is that really we faced some unprecedented barriers when we initially entered phase 2. In 2017, 2018, we knew that the infrastructure, the planned special economic zones, the Gwadar port is about facilitating industry, is about creating jobs, it's about bringing Pakistan back as a more industrialized economy. We are more export oriented, right? That was always the focus. But because of various factors, COVID, for example, we also had the unprecedented floods. The global economy is facing some unprecedented challenges. Because of that, this has been delayed a little bit. So I think, I mean, coming back to Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's visit, the idea
Zoon, if you hold for a second, I'll come back to you to take your understanding regarding this particular very important anticipated visit. Let me take a couple of points that you've already highlighted, especially regarding enhancing the capacity of this and making the workforce more skilled appropriately to be utilized in those special economic zones. Dr. Fazal Rahman, the kind of suggestions and recommendations put forth by Zoon, your understanding regarding that?
Well, actually, I agree, with what she has said about the technical education and about the skill development. I think Tang International Cooperation from China is also working with around 50 Pakistani universities and opening up special skill training facilitation and also organizing split degree programs in which students would be studying here in Pakistani universities for 2 years, and 1 year they will spend in China on enhancing their technical skills. So that process has already begun, that has already started. But the point here is that we have to envisage the future. We have to look into the future and identify the areas in which areas we would be requiring skilled technical manpower. It's not like making a doctor or an engineer or somebody, and then there will be a surplus of human resource, unemployed. We don't want to do that. We don't want to enter in that kind of a situation. So we have to foresee what would be our requirement of human resource in certain industry in the next 5 years, and we should
what
prepare.
key areas do you identify at this particular point in time, and upon which you would like to make recommendations to the authorities?
I think that what we are expecting or anticipating is that China is going to transfer some of the labor intensive industry into Pakistan, as they have done in Southeast Asia also, and it will benefit Pakistan, it will create employment, and it will add to Pakistan's exportable produce also. So we need to we need to train our youth into sort of textile, in electronics manufacturing, in small and medium sized industry, so that small and medium sized industry base should expand. And also we need to train sort of people in highly skilled areas where they are required as kind of skill based contribution or skill based assistance for
So the dividends associated, as far as specifically talking about through the lens of CPEC and its dividends, that highly skilled workforce in those highly skilled those particular areas, what those areas between Pakistan and China, as far as the technological advancement on that particular dimension is concerned, what are those?
We have to look at the kind of the structure of each special economic zone, what kind of industry is being put into that specific special economic zone, and then we have to create kind of a local endowment of the nearby regions and the people, and try to impart those required skills which can be utilized in those special economic zones. So it's kind of a comprehensive long-term research and planning which needs to be done. And I think that the responsible people who are dealing with it must be doing it.
Right, Zoon, do you identify certain key areas where two sort of workforce or the skilled workers are required? One is that has been mentioned by Dr. Fazal Rahman, is that industry where labor intensive industry that is to be brought in by China. What sort of key areas do you identify as far as that one is concerned? And when we talk specifically in the direction of technology, the highly skilled workforce, in what key areas do you identify?
Okay, I think firstly, I completely agree with Dr. Fazal on the point that it will have to be a very targeted approach. We already did identify a few sectors. For example, agriculture is very important. We are talking about high-tech agriculture. We are talking about renewable energy. I mean, a lot of it is university graduates, but technical and vocational education is central to make a majority of the workforce. And then obviously we have textile. I would say, the concept of the industry, of even in Pakistan, industrial chambers. I myself had experience working with PEF back in 2010-11, where we were making the chambers of commerce work together with Pakistani vocational education institutes to collaborate, and those chambers, the industrialists who will hire those people, identify specifically, we need 100 people in this program, we need 20 people in this program, etc., etc., etc. So in this process, we already within Pakistan have the experience of creating those ecosystems where it is not just technical and vocational education institutes, and it is not just the Pakistani government determining that, okay, we anticipate agriculture or IT or these high tech. We are not in a position as governments to determine that. What we need to do is, let's say that in this PM visit, right, during this visit, let's say we have delegations of businessmen from Pakistan. We have certain commitments coming from Chinese businesses. I think that will be a key, hopefully that will be a key achievement in this visit. Then we collaborate with those businesses saying that this is the skill, you have to determine now how much skilled labor you need, and then let's think about enrolling them in programs. Because one of the most important things is that this gap between, the investors finding skilled labor and also the institutes training skilled labor that doesn't find a job. This gap can be filled simply by ensuring that it is the investors, it is the businesses, it is those factory owners that are basically pushing the direction of skilled labor. So this is how it works in China. This is how it works in East Asian countries. You need to create a more specific ecosystem to also ensure that whatever investment is being made, whatever the even young students, I mean, they are making an investment. It's of their resources, of their time, and also their money to get those degrees. So why not connect them directly with their potential employers? And then let's see that one here is, let's say, institutes in China, like Dr. Fazal mentioned, Tang is doing that already. And then maybe the rest is in Pakistan on-job training. They get the diploma, they have been trained, they are appropriate for the job that is anticipated. So this is going to be the process, essentially.
Right, Dr. Fazal Rahman, now this particular visit, after learning the lessons from the phase one, of course, the authorities would have definitely done their homework. What are those areas to be deliberated upon mutually when there happen to be high-level interactions between Pakistan and China during this particular visit?
I think it's a formal inauguration of phase two, in which agriculture, mining, tourism, IT, all these sectors are going to be focused in the future. And I think agriculture is one of the sectors which can provide quick dividends, because there's a very large pool of agricultural experts in Pakistan who have been trained in China. There are hundreds of them, starting from Sindh University up to Peshawar University. So I think we can use that human resource.
Okay, so in order to enhance the agricultural productivity and ultimately having more agricultural exports, you just mentioned there is a huge potential in that particular area to have the quicker dividends coming up. What needs to be done? What Pakistan needs the most at that particular point when we are looking forward to have larger yields? Is it the new types of seeds, or is it something else, or is it agricultural, industry related things?
It's the application of new agricultural technologies, which can certainly enhance. Of course, development of new seeds, new breeds is a part of that. And I think that already that process has started. In kind of a corporate farming model, the Chinese have acquired, not acquired actually, they have engaged with a very large tract of land with the Pakistani counterparts, and they have grown chilies there, and the entire crop has been bought by them. It's already bought before it is really sold. So that kind of a model can really enrich our agriculturists, and even can really trickle down to the medium-sized farmers. The other thing is that Pakistan is spending a lot of money on agricultural imports also. So we need to really cut down on that in order to save our foreign exchange reserves.
Right, Zoon, unfortunately we're short of time. I'll have to end the show in just a couple of minutes from now. Your quick comments. There was very important point that was highlighted by Dr. Daud in his take. Women participation. When we talk about women participation, more and more women participation as far as CPEC is concerned, what are your suggestions?
My first thoughts are that we have seen an increase in women's participation in the workforce in parts of Pakistan that was unfathomable. We've seen women as truck drivers, even, really empowering and able to feed their families. And we see women working actively, in office environments in a very welcome way in Gwadar and other CPEC projects. I think women's empowerment and inclusion and participation is something that Pakistan has wanted, given China's success in that. And the fact that, Chinese workforce has been very, in this sense, inclusive of women, is a good opportunity for Pakistan as well. I think my own feeling was when I went to Gwadar and I interacted with the community there, parents felt very comfortable sending their daughters to work in the Chinese companies as well. So I think it's creating this environment. It is much needed. And this is a positive development if we are able to achieve more of that. And I also want to add that agriculture is important increasingly, because obviously Pakistan should have more food security. China has success in that. China has overcapacity. We can learn from that. But also because agriculture is the sector that employs the most people And it is the sector that can have the most impact in terms of women's inclusion and economic empowerment as well. So this is an important aspect, and I'm glad we are prioritizing it.
Zoon, thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Zoon Ahmad Khan, Research Fellow at Center for China and Globalization. Always great to have you on the show. Look forward to have more interactions in future. Dr. Fazal Rahman, Executive Director of Pakistan Consulate in China. Thank you very much for your insightful discussion in the show tonight also. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.